In 2011, a website appeared on the dark web that would change the internet forever. It looked like Amazon. It functioned like eBay. But instead of books and electronics, it sold cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, and weapons. You could buy a kilogram of pure MDMA with a few clicks, have it delivered to your doorstep within days, all completely anonymous. The site was called Silk Road, and at its peak, it generated over $200 million in sales. But this isn't just a story about drugs. This is a story about a young libertarian idealist who believed he was creating freedom, about federal agents who became the criminals they were hunting, about betrayal at every level, by friends, by partners, by the very people sworn to uphold the law. The man behind Silk Road called himself Dread Pirate Roberts, a reference to the Princess Bride. His real name was Ross Ulbricht. He was 26 years old when he created the world's first dark web marketplace. By 29, he was serving a double life sentence plus 40 years without possibility of parole. And the agents who brought him down? Some are now in prison themselves, convicted of theft, corruption, and betrayal.
This is the story of the Silk Road,
where everyone betrayed everyone, where idealism collided with reality, where the pursuit of freedom led to a cage, and where the line between criminal and cop disappeared entirely.
Ross Ulbricht grew up in Austin, Texas, a bright kid from a loving family. He earned a scholarship to the University of Texas, studying physics. He went on to graduate school at Penn State, researching crystallography. By all accounts, he was brilliant, thoughtful, and idealistic. But he was also deeply influenced by libertarian philosophy, the belief that individuals should be free to make their own choices without government interference. He read Austrian economics. He studied Ludwig von Mises and Murray Rothbard. He embraced radical individualism, and he began to see the war on drugs as government tyranny. In his view, what people chose to put in their own bodies was their business, not the government's, not the police's. Drug prohibition, he believed, created violence, incarceration, and suffering, not safety. So in 2010, Ross began thinking, what if there was a place where people could buy drugs safely, without violence, without supporting cartels? What if you could remove the criminal element from drug trade by moving it online? What if you could use technology to create a free market beyond government control? He started coding. By January 2011, Silk Road was live. It operated on the Tor network, software that anonymizes internet traffic by routing it through multiple servers worldwide. Users accessed it through the Tor browser. Transactions were conducted exclusively in Bitcoin, the cryptocurrency that promised anonymity. Sellers set up shop, buyers left reviews, disputes were mediated. It was a functioning marketplace with one difference: everything for sale was illegal. Ross posted the site on online forums, inviting users to check it out. Word spread quickly.
Silk Road wasn't just drugs. You could buy forged documents, passports, driver's licenses, diplomas. You could buy hacking tools, stolen credit card numbers, counterfeit currency. There were listings for weapons, though Ross later banned these, claiming they violated his non-aggression principle. But drugs were the main product, every drug imaginable. And the site had rules: no child pornography, no stolen goods, no services designed to harm others, like hitmen, though this would become darkly ironic later. Ross genuinely believed he was creating something positive. In his mind, Silk Road reduced harm. Buyers could read reviews and avoid dangerous dealers. Sellers competed on quality, not violence. Transactions happened without street crime. He wrote about his vision on the site's forums, using the pseudonym Dread Pirate Roberts. He quoted libertarian philosophy. He talked about economic freedom. He framed himself as a revolutionary challenging an unjust system. Users loved it. The community grew rapidly. By 2012, Silk Road had thousands of listings and tens of thousands of users. It was making millions. And Ross, now fully immersed in his Dread Pirate Roberts persona, was becoming addicted to the power. But the federal government was watching. The Drug Enforcement Administration, the FBI, Homeland Security, and IRS criminal investigation all launched parallel investigations. Silk Road was impossible to ignore. Media outlets were writing about it. Senators were demanding action. But how do you catch someone operating anonymously on the dark web? Traditional law enforcement techniques didn't work. You couldn't surveil a website on Tor. You couldn't trace Bitcoin transactions easily. The FBI needed a different approach. The first break. A Homeland Security agent named Gary Alford started tracing Bitcoin transactions. Bitcoin isn't truly anonymous. Every transaction is recorded on a public blockchain. If you can link a Bitcoin address to a real person, you can follow the money. Alford discovered that Silk Road Bitcoins were being converted to cash through exchanges. Those exchanges required identity verification. Slowly, he began mapping the network. The second break. An IRS investigator named Gary Alford, different Gary, found something interesting. In January 2011, just as Silk Road launched, someone posted on a mushroom cultivation forum asking about starting an anonymous website. The username, Altoid. Later, Altoid posted on a Bitcoin forum, promoting Silk Road and asking for developers. The post included an email address, rossulbricht@gmail.com. It was an amateur mistake, a brief moment of carelessness that connected Ross Ulbricht directly to Silk Road's creation. The FBI now had a name, but they needed proof. They needed to catch Dread Pirate Roberts in the act. While federal agents closed in, Ross was living two lives. To his family and friends, he was a bright, thoughtful young man struggling to find direction after graduate school. He dated, he surfed, he practiced yoga. He talked about starting a business. His parents had no idea he was running the world's largest drug marketplace. But privately, Ross was consumed by Silk Road. He coded constantly. He managed the site. He mediated disputes. He developed the Dread Pirate Roberts persona into a legend. He hired administrators to help run the site, people he never met in person, only knew by usernames. He was making enormous amounts of money, tens of millions in Bitcoin. But he was also becoming paranoid. Users were getting arrested. Law enforcement was clearly investigating. Competition from copycat sites was emerging. And then came the threats. A user claimed to have discovered Ross's identity and demanded payment to stay silent. Another user, a site administrator, allegedly stole Bitcoin and threatened to expose the site unless paid. Ross, faced with existential threats to Silk Road, made a decision that would seal his fate. He tried to have them killed. This is where Ross Ulbricht's story turns from libertarian idealist to something much darker. In early 2013, a Silk Road user named Friendly Chemist began blackmailing Ross. Friendly Chemist claimed to have information about Silk Road users and vendors. He demanded $500,000 or he'd release it to law enforcement.
Ross, terrified that exposure would destroy Silk Road, reached out to another user, Red and White, who claimed to be a drug cartel member. Ross asked Red and White to kill Friendly Chemist. They negotiated a price, $150,000 in Bitcoin. Red and White claimed to have carried out the hit, sending Ross a staged photo of a man supposedly tortured and killed. Ross paid. Later, another problem arose. A Silk Road employee, Chronic Pain, was arrested. Ross feared he'd cooperate with authorities. Again, Ross allegedly arranged a hit through Red and White. Again, he paid. But here's the twist. Red and White was likely an undercover agent or a scam artist. No murders actually occurred. No bodies were ever found. Friendly Chemist and Chronic Pain were likely fake identities created to entrap Ross. But Ross didn't know that. He believed he'd ordered murders, and he paid for them. The idealistic libertarian who claimed to oppose violence had crossed a line he couldn't uncross.
While the FBI built their case against Ross, two federal agents were committing crimes of their own. Carl Mark Force IV was a DEA agent assigned to the Silk Road investigation. Sean Bridges was a Secret Service agent working on the same task force. Both had access to Silk Road's systems. Both had opportunities to manipulate evidence. And both decided to steal. Carl Force's crimes. Force created multiple fake identities on Silk Road, including possibly Red and White, the alleged hitman Ross paid. He extorted Ross, demanding payments to various personas. He stole over $700,000 in Bitcoin from Silk Road and user accounts. He sold information about the investigation to Ross, without Ross knowing he was a federal agent. He used his law enforcement access to steal, extort, and profit, all while claiming to be investigating. Sean Bridges' crimes. Bridges had administrative access to Silk Road's back-end during the investigation. He transferred over $800,000 in Bitcoin to personal accounts. He manipulated evidence to cover his tracks. He attempted to flee to Barbados when his theft was discovered. These weren't rogue agents acting alone. They were integral parts of the investigation, and they were criminals. The betrayal. The irony is staggering. Ross was prosecuted for creating a criminal marketplace, but the agents who caught him were stealing from that same marketplace. Ross was convicted partly based on murder-for-hire charges, plots that may have been orchestrated by corrupt agents. The people sworn to uphold the law were breaking it more brazenly than many of the criminals they pursued. Both Force and Bridges were eventually convicted and sentenced to prison, but their crimes raised disturbing questions about the entire investigation. By October 2013, the FBI was ready to move. They knew Ross Ulbricht was Dread Pirate Roberts. They knew he lived in San Francisco, but they needed to catch him logged into Silk Road with administrative access, irrefutable proof. The FBI surveilled Ross for weeks. They tracked his movements, monitored his habits. On October 1st, 2013, Ross went to the Glen Park Public Library in San Francisco. He sat at a table near the science fiction section. He opened his laptop. He logged into Silk Road as Dread Pirate Roberts. FBI agents moved in, disguised as library patrons. One staged a loud argument to distract Ross. As he looked away, an agent grabbed his laptop before he could close it or encrypt it. Ross was arrested. His laptop was still logged into Silk Road's administrative panel. His private encryption keys were in memory. The evidence was overwhelming. Silk Road was shut down. A seizure notice appeared on the site. It was over. Ross Ulbricht went to trial in 2015
The prosecution presented devastating evidence. His laptop with full administrative access to Silk Road, Bitcoin wallets containing millions, journal entries documenting his creation and operation of the site, chat logs showing his involvement in murder-for-hire plots, the Altoid forum posts linking him directly to Silk Road's creation. Ross's defense argued he created Silk Road but sold it to others. He was framed by the real Dread Pirate Roberts. The corrupt agents, Force and Bridges, tainted the investigation. The judge blocked much of this defense, ruling it was speculative. Ross did not testify. The jury deliberated for 3.5 hours. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Narcotics trafficking, computer hacking, money laundering, continuing criminal enterprise, the Kingpin statute. At sentencing, the judge gave Ross 2 life sentences plus 40 years without possibility of parole. The judge cited the murder-for-hire plots as evidence of his dangerousness, despite no murders occurring and no charges filed for those crimes. Ross was 31 years old. He will likely die in prison. The Silk Road case raises profound questions. Was Ross a criminal mastermind or a misguided idealist? He undoubtedly created and profited from a massive drug marketplace, but he genuinely believed he was reducing harm and promoting freedom. Was his sentence just? Life without parole is typically reserved for violent offenders. Ross was convicted of non-violent crimes. The murder-for-hire plots, never charged, were used at sentencing. Others convicted of creating dark web marketplaces received far lighter sentences. What about the corrupt agents? Carl Force received 6.5 years. Sean Bridges received 6 years. They stole, extorted, and manipulated evidence, yet served a fraction of Ross's sentence. Did Silk Road actually reduce harm? Some argue yes, safer transactions, quality control, no street violence. Others argue no, it made drugs more accessible and normalized illegal activity. The Free Ross movement. Ross's family and supporters have campaigned for clemency. They argue his sentence is excessive and unjust. Over 500,000 people have signed petitions for his release. Some libertarians view him as a political prisoner, persecuted for challenging government authority over drug policy. The government's perspective. Prosecutors argue Ross enabled massive drug trafficking, harmed countless lives, and attempted to have people murdered. They say the sentence reflects the severity of his crimes and serves as a deterrent. The truth? Probably somewhere in between. Ross created something genuinely innovative and philosophically interesting. He also profited from human suffering and made catastrophic moral decisions. He was both victim and perpetrator, idealist and criminal, visionary and fool. Silk Road didn't end with Ross's arrest. Within weeks, Silk Road 2.0 launched, then Alphabay, then dozens of others, each marketplace bigger and more sophisticated than the last. The dark web drug trade didn't disappear, it exploded. Law enforcement plays whack-a-mole. They shut down one site, 3 more appear. The technology Ross pioneered, Tor, Bitcoin, encrypted marketplaces, continues to evolve. Today's dark web is larger, more decentralized, and harder to police than ever. The crypto legacy. Bitcoin was worth about $13 when Silk Road launched. The site's success helped legitimize cryptocurrency. Today, Bitcoin is worth tens of thousands, and blockchain technology underpins a multi-trillion-dollar industry.
Ross's experiment demonstrated that decentralized, censorship-resistant systems could work. Whether that's good or bad depends on your perspective. The philosophical question: was Ross right about anything? The war on drugs has incarcerated millions, disproportionately harmed minority communities, and failed to reduce drug use. Portugal decriminalized all drugs in 2001. Overdoses dropped, addiction rates fell, crime decreased. Maybe Ross's critique of drug prohibition had merit, even if his methods were wrong. Or maybe the ends never justify the means, and profiting from addiction is inexcusable regardless of your philosophy. The debate continues.
Ross Ulbricht is inmate 18870-111 at the United States Penitentiary in Tucson, Arizona. He's now in his 40s. He's been in prison for over a decade. His parents visit when they can. They've aged dramatically. Their son's life was taken from them by decisions he made before age 30. Ross writes letters. He studies. He paints. He reflects on what he did. In one letter he wrote, "I wish I could go back and make different choices. I can't. All I can do is learn from my mistakes and help others learn from them too." He's expressed remorse for the harm Silk Road caused, but he maintains he never intended violence, never wanted people hurt. He believed genuinely that he was creating something good. And that belief, that idealism, collided with reality in the most devastating way possible. Outside, the world has moved on. New marketplaces, new technologies, new debates about freedom, privacy, and government power. But Ross remains frozen in time, paying for crimes committed a decade ago by a younger version of himself who believed he was changing the world. Was justice served, or was he made an example? Is he a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ideology, or a victim of government overreach? The answer depends on who you ask, but everyone agrees on one thing. The Silk Road changed the internet forever, and Ross Ulbricht's life is the price that was paid. The Silk Road was built on betrayal. Ross betrayed his principles when he sought violence. His employees betrayed him to save themselves. Federal agents betrayed their oaths for personal profit. The government betrayed its promise of proportional justice. Everyone betrayed everyone, and in the end, no one won. Ross is in prison. The corrupt agents served light sentences. Drug trafficking continues unabated. The dark web thrives. The war on drugs rages on. The debates remain unresolved. The Silk Road is gone, but its ghost haunts the internet. Every encrypted message, every cryptocurrency transaction, every debate about freedom versus security. Ross Ulbricht's legacy isn't a marketplace, it's a question. In the digital age, where governments can't control information, where anonymity is possible, where borders are meaningless, who decides what's right and wrong? And when everyone is both criminal and victim, betrayer and betrayed, where does justice even begin? The Silk Road had no answers, only consequences.